Most people have heard of intermittent fasting, but almost nobody knows about the olive oil fasting method that's quietly blowing up in metabolic research. It sounds almost too simple to be real. You take a single tablespoon of high-polyphenol extra virgin olive oil during a fasting window, and suddenly the body flips metabolic switches that normally take days of strict fasting to activate. What's wild is how researchers are seeing a dramatic rise in cellular cleanup, the process we call autophagy, within hours. And for seniors especially, this matters because your cells hold on to more damaged proteins, more broken mitochondria, and more inflammatory waste that slows digestion, energy, and fat burning. But the truly shocking part is what happens to insulin. Your body becomes so sensitive so quickly that even one day of this olive oil fasting trick can break the cycle of stubborn insulin resistance that blocks weight loss for years. The question is, why does a simple spoon of oil unlock a response that many people struggle to get even with long fasts? And more importantly, how to use it safely so you don't spike glucose or store more fat? Comment your age and location, and make sure to subscribe for more science-based tools that help you stay strong, lean, and energetic. When you first hear that a tablespoon of olive oil can trigger a deep metabolic shift, it almost sounds like a gimmick. But once you understand what happens inside the body after age 60, it becomes obvious why this simple method is gaining so much attention. As the years go by, your cells accumulate metabolic junk. Oxidized fats, damaged mitochondria, stiff cell membranes, and sticky proteins that your body struggled to recycle when your insulin levels stayed high for too long. This cellular clutter slows your metabolism the same way a clogged air filter slows an engine. Your body wants to clean house, but insulin resistance keeps the doors locked. Every time insulin stays elevated, even a little, your cells remain in storage mode instead of repair mode. That's the trap most people fall into. They try cutting calories or skipping meals or even long fasting windows, but they're still dealing with the underlying problem of metabolic stiffness. And this is where olive oil fasting becomes shockingly powerful, because it pushes insulin low enough, quickly enough, to release the brakes on autophagy. What most people don't realize is that autophagy isn't just a trendy wellness term. It's your body's built-in recycling system, and after 60, you rely on it far more than someone in their 20s or 30s. Younger bodies naturally cycle through damaged cells faster. Seniors accumulate damage more easily, especially if they've spent decades battling inflammation, high triglycerides, or abdominal fat. When insulin stays high, even slightly, autophagy remains switched off. Think of insulin as the stop sign for cellular cleanup. And here's the twist. Fasting reduces insulin slowly for some people, especially those who have been insulin resistant for years. That's why so many seniors say they don't feel the benefits of fasting until many hours in. But when you introduce a spoon of polyphenol-rich extra virgin olive oil, those plant compounds bind to receptors in the gut that calm inflammatory pathways and help insulin levels fall more efficiently. Instead of spending half your fasting window trying to get your insulin down, you get a head start. Another key piece many people overlook is how olive oil affects the hunger hormone ghrelin. The reason so many people fail fasting is because hunger spikes early, cortisol rises, and stress hormones convince the body that fasting is dangerous. But olive oil contains bioactive compounds that activate satiety centers in the brain. Not only does that small dose flatten ghrelin spikes, it also stabilizes your nervous system so your body stays in a repair-friendly mode rather than a stress response. Seniors especially benefit from this because cortisol and blood sugar swings get more unpredictable with age. When your hunger is calmer, your glucose curve stays flatter, and that means your insulin sensitivity improves hour by hour. It's like giving your pancreas a rest, letting it reset from years of overworking. This creates the perfect internal environment for autophagy to finally switch on in a noticeable, measurable way. The olive oil itself is part of the story, but the real magic comes from the polyphenols. These plant nutrients act like microscopic sparks that wake up sluggish mitochondria. As you age, your mitochondria, the engines of your cells, become damaged and burn fuel inefficiently. This is why energy drops, belly fat accumulates around the organs, and recovery takes longer. Certain polyphenols and high-quality extra virgin olive oil activate pathways in the body that instruct your cells to break down old mitochondrial fragments and rebuild healthier ones. This is mitochondrial autophagy, and it's one of the reasons people report clearer thinking, better digestion, and smoother energy after just one day of this method. What makes this so important is that damaged mitochondria are one of the hidden causes of insulin resistance. When mitochondrial function drops, your cells stop responding properly to insulin. By forcing your body to recycle the weak mitochondria and rebuild stronger ones, you become more insulin sensitive, sometimes within hours. Another advantage for seniors is how olive oil fasting impacts fat storage hormones. When insulin resistance has been going on for years, your fat cells become stubborn and locked, refusing to release stored fat for energy. You may be fasting, eating less, walking more, but the fat still doesn't want to budge. Olive oil interrupts this hormonal loop by improving fatty acid mobilization. Once insulin drops low enough and your cells regain sensitivity, your body finally gets the signal to release stored fat instead of clinging to it. Many people notice this first around the stomach area where visceral fat is the most hormonally active. When that fat begins to shrink, inflammation decreases further, and insulin resistance decreases even more. It becomes a positive cycle instead of a downward spiral. One of the most underestimated effects of olive oil fasting is its impact on the gut. Seniors often deal with slower digestion, bloating, constipation, and a sluggish microbiome. When your gut is inflamed, it sends distress signals to your pancreas, which increases insulin output even when you're fasting. A spoon of high-quality olive oil soothes the gut lining and feeds beneficial bacteria. A calmer gut means fewer stress hormones, better glucose control, and a stronger fasting response overall. Autophagy in the gut lining is one of the earliest benefits people feel. Digestive lightness, less bloating, easier mornings. When your gut is less inflamed, your whole metabolic system becomes more responsive, especially your insulin pathways. The most surprising benefit seniors notice, though, is how quickly the body adapts. Once insulin sensitivity improves, even slightly, the next fasting session becomes easier. Hunger is lower, energy feels steadier, recovery feels faster. This builds confidence. Instead of struggling through hours of fasting hoping for results, you are giving your body a metabolic tool that accelerates everything. And because the olive oil trick lowers the stress burden of fasting, it's safer and more sustainable for seniors who worry about weakness, dizziness, or over-restricting calories. Over time, this rhythm helps re-educate your metabolism, allowing you to burn fat more consistently and unlock deeper levels of cellular healing that were previously inaccessible. When people talk about fixing insulin resistance, they usually focus on cutting carbs, walking after meals, or doing long fasts. Those habits help, but they don't solve the deeper issue. Your cells are no longer hearing insulin's signal the way they used to. And this becomes even more pronounced after 60. Your muscle cells shrink, your mitochondria slow down, and your liver becomes less flexible. Insulin tries to deliver glucose into your cells, but the door is practically jammed. That is why your blood glucose remains higher, longer, even if you're eating clean. Olive oil fasting works differently. Instead of trying to force your body into fat burning through restriction, it unlocks the metabolic doorway from the inside. The combination of fasting and polyphenols changes the shape and sensitivity of insulin receptors so quickly that your cells suddenly start responding again. Seniors especially feel this shift because their receptors tend to be more rigid and inflamed. This is why even one day of this method can feel like someone turned the lights back on inside your metabolism. A big part of insulin resistance comes from something most people never hear about: metabolic inflammation that builds up in the fat surrounding your organs. This visceral fat is extremely hormonal. It behaves like an angry gland sending out inflammatory messengers that block insulin's signal. You can be eating well, walking daily, and still feel stuck if that internal fat is inflamed. Fasting alone can reduce some of that inflammation, but it can take many hours. Olive oil fasting accelerates this process because the polyphenols penetrate deep into fatty tissue and calm inflammatory pathways that insulin relies on. Once those inflammatory messengers are silenced, your pancreas doesn't have to yell anymore. It can whisper, and your cells finally listen. Seniors often feel this as a sudden lightness in their stomach area, a reduction in bloating, or a sense that their waistband isn't fighting them as much. And that's not imagination. It's the metabolic fire inside your visceral fat cooling down. One of the most fascinating effects of olive oil fasting is how it impacts liver flexibility. The liver is the command center for your metabolism. It decides whether you store energy or release it. Over time, especially with high insulin, the liver becomes rigid, overloaded with fat droplets, and burned out from decades of metabolic stress. When this happens, the liver stops releasing stored energy efficiently. Instead, it keeps dumping glucose into the blood, contributing to high fasting sugars. Fasting alone can help the liver unload some of this fat, but olive oil fasting gives the liver the signal to start detoxing sooner. The polyphenols increase bile flow, improve fat oxidation, and encourage the liver to begin burning intraliver fat. This is one of the main reasons people feel sharper, lighter, and less foggy during olive oil fasting. Once the liver starts functioning more cleanly, insulin resistance drops quickly because the liver becomes better at regulating blood sugar throughout the day. Another hidden benefit is what happens to your muscles during this process. Muscle tissue is the largest consumer of glucose in the body. As you age, you naturally lose muscle fibers if you're not actively maintaining them. The less muscle you have, the harder it becomes to regulate blood sugar. But when autophagy activates during fasting, especially enhanced fasting like this, the body clears out old dysfunctional muscle cells and makes room for healthier, more insulin-sensitive ones. This is why some seniors notice that their strength improves faster after incorporating olive oil fasting. They're repairing muscle at a cellular level, improving glucose absorption, and reducing the burden on their pancreas. It's like upgrading old machinery without having to do extreme workouts or complex routines. Many seniors also struggle with unpredictable energy dips throughout the day. These dips are usually blamed on age, but more often, they come from unstable insulin and cortisol cycles. During a traditional fast, cortisol can spike too quickly, making you feel shaky, cold, or irritable. Olive oil fasting softens that cortisol spike by providing stable fatty acids that your body can use immediately for energy. This doesn't break your fast because fat has almost no effect on insulin. Instead, it gives your brain and body a smooth energy curve, preventing the stress response that usually sabotages fasting attempts. When the stress hormones stay low, insulin resistance improves faster because cortisol is no longer blocking insulin's signal. This creates a metabolic environment where healing is not only possible but accelerated. Another major factor that seniors deal with is oxidative stress. Over decades, free radicals accumulate and damage cell membranes, insulin receptors, mitochondria, and DNA. This oxidative stress is one of the biggest reasons insulin resistance becomes more stubborn with age. Olive oil contains antioxidants that neutralize these free radicals, but the polyphenols in high-quality extra virgin olive oil are even more potent. When combined with fasting, these polyphenols enter a metabolic state where their antioxidant power increases dramatically. They help repair insulin receptors, smooth out cell membranes, and improve the flow of nutrients into the cell. This is why many people experience better brain clarity, less joint stiffness, and calmer digestion when using this method. It's not the olive oil alone, it's the synergy between fasting and the antioxidants that repairs damage at the root. What surprises most seniors is how quickly cravings start to disappear. Insulin resistance drives cravings because your cells are starving while your bloodstream is full of glucose that can't get inside. Once the cells become sensitive again, the cravings lose their power. You suddenly don't feel trapped by your appetite. Olive oil fasting helps stabilize leptin, the hormone that tells your brain you've had enough. When leptin stabilizes, insulin also stabilizes, and the body no longer panics for quick sugar. Many people describe this as a feeling of freedom they haven't experienced in decades. Food stops controlling you, and fasting becomes something your body naturally leans into instead of fighting. But perhaps the most powerful part of olive oil fasting is the compounding effect. With each fasting window, autophagy gets a little stronger, insulin sensitivity improves further, inflammation lowers more deeply, and metabolic healing becomes easier. Seniors who once struggled to fast even 8 hours often find that after a few olive oil fasting sessions, they can comfortably extend their window without stress. And as insulin resistance fades, everything becomes easier. Losing weight, stabilizing energy, reducing joint pain, improving memory, sleeping deeper. You begin to feel like your body is finally working with you again, not against you. One of the biggest concerns seniors have when they hear about fasting is the fear of weakness, feeling lightheaded, shaky, or drained. This fear is valid because traditional fasting forces your body to switch fuel sources abruptly, and after 60, this transition becomes slower and more uncomfortable. But olive oil fasting changes that entire experience. Instead of your body scrambling to find energy, you're supplying a clean, stable fat source that doesn't spike insulin yet provides enough fuel to keep your brain steady. This prevents the stress response that often breaks a fast prematurely. With olive oil fasting, your body quietly shifts into fat-burning mode without triggering alarm signals. And because insulin stays low, the metabolic switch happens earlier, smoother, and with far fewer symptoms. Seniors often say this is the first fasting method that feels gentle instead of harsh. They don't fear the process anymore. They actually look forward to the stability it brings. Another powerful aspect is how olive oil fasting helps repair metabolic flexibility, the ability to switch between burning sugar and burning fat. Most people struggling with insulin resistance have lost this flexibility. Their bodies are stuck in sugar-burning mode, which means hunger shows up quickly, energy drops fast, and cravings feel uncontrollable. But when you introduce olive oil during fasting, you give your body a bridge to walk across. The fatty acids in the olive oil become immediate fuel, allowing your mitochondria to practice burning fat again. Over time, this retrains your metabolism to access stored fat more efficiently. Seniors especially need this because decades of carb-to-dominant eating patterns make fat burning feel foreign to the body. Once flexibility returns, fasting no longer feels like deprivation. Instead, it feels like your natural state, calm, focused, and evenly energized. This is why even one day of olive oil fasting can create such a noticeable shift. What makes this method even more interesting is the way it interacts with the nervous system. As we age, the sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight response, tends to dominate more easily. Stress, inflammation, lack of sleep, and blood sugar swings all activate this system, keeping your body in a state of emergency. When you're in emergency mode, insulin spikes more easily, fat gets stored faster, and autophagy gets shut off. Olive oil fasting sends the opposite signal. The monounsaturated fats and polyphenols activate receptors in the gut that communicate directly with the vagus nerve, telling the body to switch into rest and repair mode. This immediately lowers stress hormones, which allows autophagy to deepen. Seniors feel this as a sense of calm, less anxiety, less tension in the body, less mental restlessness. When the nervous system is balanced, insulin resistance improves dramatically because cortisol is no longer constantly pushing your blood sugar up. Another overlooked benefit is the impact on the immune system. Inflamed immune cells interfere with insulin signaling, and this becomes more common with age. Your immune system becomes more reactive, less efficient, and more likely to trigger chronic low-grade inflammation. Fasting itself already supports immune repair, but olive oil fasting gives it an extra boost by providing polyphenols that calm overactive immune cells. These compounds help regulate cytokines, the inflammatory messengers that worsen insulin resistance. As your immune system relaxes, your metabolism becomes far more responsive. Seniors often feel this as less joint stiffness, fewer inflammatory flare-ups, and easier movement. When inflammation cools down, insulin receptors begin working again, and visceral fat becomes easier to reduce. It's a chain reaction of healing that starts with a simple tablespoon of oil. A lot of people underestimate the relationship between sleep and insulin sensitivity. After 60, sleep becomes more fragile, lighter, more fragmented, and easily disrupted. Poor sleep makes insulin resistance worse, and insulin resistance makes sleep worse. It becomes a loop that feels impossible to break. But olive oil fasting can help reset this cycle because it stabilizes energy throughout the day, reduces evening cravings, and balances cortisol earlier. When cortisol stabilizes, melatonin rises more smoothly at night, helping you fall asleep easier. And because your insulin levels stay low throughout the fasting window, your body experiences deeper nighttime repair. Seniors frequently report waking up with more mental clarity and less grogginess after just one evening using this method. Better sleep means improved insulin sensitivity, and improved insulin sensitivity leads to even better sleep. It becomes a positive metabolic cycle. Another surprising benefit is how olive oil fasting affects digestion. As we age, stomach acid levels drop, enzyme production slows, and the gut lining becomes more vulnerable. This leads to bloating, heaviness, constipation, and discomfort. Fasting helps because it gives the digestive system a break, but olive oil adds another layer of support. The healthy fats act as a smooth lubricant for the intestines while the polyphenols reduce gut inflammation. This combination creates a healing environment inside the digestive tract. Seniors often feel a lighter abdomen, smoother digestion, and fewer morning stomach issues after using this method for even a short time. When the gut calms down, insulin sensitivity increases because the gut is one of the largest regulators of metabolic signals. A healthier gut means cleaner communication between your digestive system, liver, pancreas, and brain. Olive oil fasting also helps restore hormonal balance in ways people don't expect. Insulin is not the only hormone involved in weight gain and aging. There's leptin, ghrelin, cortisol, estrogen, and even thyroid hormones. As these hormones become imbalanced, your body becomes confused about hunger, energy usage, and fat storage. The combination of fasting and healthy fats helps regulate these hormones by reducing inflammation and stabilizing energy flow. Seniors notice this as fewer cravings, improved appetite control, and more consistent energy. Hormonal balance is one of the key markers of healthy aging, and olive oil fasting provides a simple, non-invasive tool to support this process. But the most empowering part of this method is how quickly your body begins responding. Many seniors spend years feeling stuck, trying diets, pills, and exercise routines that never seem to make a dent. Olive oil fasting breaks that pattern because it works directly on the systems that control healing, autophagy, insulin signaling, mitochondrial repair, nervous system balance, and inflammation. Once these systems wake up, the body regains its ability to change. Weight loss becomes easier, energy improves, thinking becomes clearer, digestion feels lighter, and cravings quiet down. It's not magic, it's simply unlocking the biology you already have. The most eye-opening part of olive oil fasting is how quickly the body starts to correct patterns that have been building for decades. Most people reach their 60s carrying layers of metabolic wear, insulin resistance, mitochondrial slowdown, digestive sluggishness, and deep inflammation that quietly drains energy day after day. The idea that something as simple as a tablespoon of olive oil during a fasting window could interrupt that entire cycle feels almost unbelievable. But the truth is, the body is constantly searching for opportunities to heal. It's just been stuck in storage mode for so long that it hasn't been able to activate the repair systems that were built into you from the beginning. When you give your body a signal strong enough, insulin dropping low and staying low, the healing pathways turn back on. That's why so many seniors notice the difference so quickly. Their body has been waiting, sometimes for years, for the chance to repair itself. One of the most dramatic changes occurs in the deepest layer of metabolism, your mitochondria's ability to burn fuel efficiently. Mitochondria are tiny engines inside your cells, and with age, they become sluggish and damaged. This slows every system in the body, from fat loss to brain function. Autophagy repairs these engines by sweeping out the broken ones and replacing them with stronger, cleaner versions. Olive oil fasting accelerates this process because healthy fats are the preferred fuel for mitochondria once insulin drops. Instead of struggling to switch from sugar burning to fat burning, your body transitions smoothly. Seniors often describe a wave of clarity, a sense that their brain is firing more cleanly, or that their focus feels lighter. That is mitochondrial repair happening behind the scenes, one of the most powerful anti-aging effects of fasting enhanced with olive oil. Another key shift happens in the pancreas itself. Years of dealing with elevated blood sugar force the pancreas to work overtime, releasing more insulin than the body can actually use. Over time, the pancreas becomes exhausted, and insulin resistance becomes even more persistent. But when you hold insulin low long enough, without starving or stressing the body, the pancreas gets a chance to rest and reset. Olive oil fasting allows this because it provides fuel without triggering insulin. Seniors often notice their fasting glucose improving faster than expected. Morning numbers gradually fall. Post-meal spikes become smaller, and the biggest sign of improvement is how the body feels: steadier, calmer, with fewer midday crashes. It's a restoration of metabolic rhythm that many people thought was gone forever. Another powerful benefit emerges in the cardiovascular system. Insulin resistance doesn't just affect fat loss, it affects blood pressure, circulation, and arterial flexibility. When insulin remains high for years, arteries stiffen, triglycerides rise, and inflammation builds around the heart. But when autophagy kicks in, the body begins recycling damaged endothelial cells, the cells that line your blood vessels. Olive oil fasting enhances this process because the polyphenols improve nitric oxide production, helping arteries relax and blood flow improve. Seniors report warmer hands and feet, less swelling in the ankles, and a smoother sensation when walking. These are subtle signs of improved vascular flexibility. Over time, this shift supports healthier blood pressure and stronger cardiovascular resilience. Another unexpected benefit is the improvement in metabolic confidence. The sense that your body is no longer unpredictable or fragile. When insulin resistance is high, hunger feels uncontrollable, weight fluctuates wildly, and energy crashes happen constantly. This creates anxiety around food, schedules, and social activities. But olive oil fasting gives people a structured, safe way to regain control. Hunger stabilizes, energy steadies, cravings fade. Every fasting window becomes easier than the last because the metabolic pathways are clearing out the clutter that once blocked progress. This confidence is especially important for seniors who have spent years feeling defeated by their metabolism. Knowing that their body is responding, sometimes within a single day, creates hope, momentum, and motivation that no diet alone can provide. Another major improvement appears in joint comfort and mobility. When autophagy increases, the body begins clearing inflammatory debris from joints, tendons, and connective tissue. Olive oil fasting enhances this because polyphenols reduce oxidative stress and calm immune overactivity. Seniors often notice less stiffness when standing up, easier walking in the mornings, and more fluid movement throughout the day. These improvements happen because the body is finally recycling damaged cells and reducing the inflammatory signals that have been flaring for years. Reduced inflammation also helps insulin receptors function better, creating another positive cycle. The skin is another place where the benefits become visible. As autophagy increases, the body begins repairing collagen fibers, reducing oxidative damage, and improving hydration within the skin cells. Seniors frequently report a healthier complexion, less dullness, improved texture, and a kind of internal glow that shows the body is repairing from the inside out. Olive oil supports this process with vitamin E and antioxidants that protect cell membranes. When insulin sensitivity improves, collagen breakdown slows, giving the skin a chance to rebuild. These outward changes are simply reflections of the deeper changes happening at the metabolic and cellular level. But perhaps the most important benefit of olive oil fasting is that it gives seniors a sustainable routine they can control. Traditional fasting methods can feel intimidating: long hours without food, strict rules, and intense discipline. But this method softens the sharp edges of fasting without sacrificing the benefits. It removes the fear, reduces the discomfort, and makes the experience pleasant enough to repeat. And repetition is where the real transformation happens. Every time insulin drops low, autophagy deepens. Every time autophagy deepens, inflammation drops. Every time inflammation drops, insulin sensitivity improves. These small wins accumulate, creating a metabolic environment where healing becomes the norm, not the exception. Olive oil fasting doesn't require perfection, rigid schedules, or suffering. It simply gives your body the chance to do what it has always wanted to do: repair, recycle, renew, and restore balance. And for seniors who have spent years feeling stuck, this method feels like the return of possibility. It's a reminder that your metabolism is not broken. It's waiting for the right conditions to activate its healing intelligence.